For 10 years, Americans were held hostage in Lebanon. They were chained to radiators. They were beaten. They were kept in darkness for years. One CIA officer was tortured to death. One hostage was held for nearly 7 years. And to free them, Ronald Reagan secretly sold weapons to Iran, America's greatest enemy. This is the story of the Beirut hostages, the decade of terror that led to the biggest scandal of the Reagan presidency. Subscribe because this story has everything: torture, secrets, and betrayal. Beirut, Lebanon, 1982. Once called the Paris of the Middle East, Beirut had become a war zone. The Lebanese Civil War had been raging since 1975. Christian militias fought Palestinian factions. Syrian forces occupied the east. Israel had just invaded the south. And into this chaos came a new player: Hezbollah. Hezbollah, Party of God, was created by Iran's Revolutionary Guards in 1982. They trained Lebanese Shia fighters. They provided weapons, money, and ideology. Their goal was simple: drive America and Israel out of Lebanon. And their method was terror. The Marine barracks bombing of 1983 killed 241 Americans. But Hezbollah had another weapon: kidnapping. Westerners in Lebanon became targets: journalists, professors, businessmen, diplomats, anyone with value as a bargaining chip. The first major American hostage was David Dodge, president of the American University of Beirut. He was kidnapped in July 1982 and held for a year before being released through Syrian mediation. But Dodge was just the beginning. On March 16, 1984, Hezbollah took their most valuable prize. William Buckley was the CIA station chief in Beirut, the top American intelligence officer in Lebanon. He was kidnapped from his apartment building in broad daylight. Gunmen grabbed him, threw him in a car, and disappeared into the maze of Beirut's southern suburbs. Buckley knew everything: names of agents, operations, secrets that could get people killed. His capture was a catastrophe for American intelligence. For the next 15 months, Buckley was tortured. His captors wanted information. They wanted to break him. They wanted to send a message. Buckley was beaten. He was subjected to mock executions. He was kept in isolation. Over time, his health deteriorated. Hezbollah filmed his confessions and sent the tapes to the CIA. The videos showed a man being destroyed, each tape showing more degradation than the last. CIA Director William Casey reportedly watched the tapes and wept. In June 1985, William Buckley died in captivity. The exact cause is unknown: illness, torture, or both. He was 57 years old. His body wasn't returned until 1991. When it was finally examined, the evidence of prolonged torture was unmistakable. Buckley wasn't the only one. Throughout 1984 and 1985, more Americans were taken. Benjamin Weir, Presbyterian minister, kidnapped May 1984. Peter Kilburn, librarian, kidnapped December 1984. Lawrence Jenko, Catholic priest, kidnapped January 1985. Terry Anderson, AP journalist, kidnapped March 1985. David Jacobson, hospital director, kidnapped May 1985. Thomas Sutherland, university dean, kidnapped June 1985. By mid-1985, at least 7 Americans were being held by Hezbollah in Lebanon. Their families pleaded for help. The government seemed powerless. Reagan was agonized by the hostage situation. He met with hostage families. He promised to bring their loved ones home. The plight of Americans in chains haunted him. But officially, American policy was clear: no negotiations with terrorists, no concessions, no ransom. Reagan himself had articulated this policy countless times. America would never give in to hostage takers. Except America did. In 1985, Reagan approved a secret plan that would become the biggest scandal of his presidency. The plan was Byzantine in its complexity. Israel would sell American weapons, including anti-tank missiles, to Iran. Iran would use its influence over Hezbollah to release American hostages. The profits from the arms sales would be diverted to fund the Contra rebels in Nicaragua, circumventing a congressional ban on such funding. It was illegal on multiple levels. It violated the arms embargo on Iran. It circumvented congressional oversight. It contradicted everything Reagan had said publicly about terrorism. And it began with good intentions, saving American lives. The first arms shipment went to Iran in August 1985. Over the following months, hundreds of TOW anti-tank missiles and Hawk surface-to-air missiles were secretly shipped to Tehran. In exchange, a few hostages were released. Benjamin Weir was freed in September 1985. Lawrence Jenko was freed in July 1986. David Jacobson was freed in November 1986. But as fast as hostages were released, new ones were taken. Hezbollah was running a profitable business, and the secret couldn't last forever. On November 3, 1986, a Lebanese magazine broke the story. The article revealed that the United States had been secretly selling weapons to Iran, America's enemy, the country that had held 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. The scandal exploded. Reagan went on television and denied trading arms for hostages. "We did not, repeat, did not trade weapons or anything else for hostages," he said. It was a lie, and everyone knew it. The Iran-Contra affair consumed the final years of Reagan's presidency. Congressional hearings revealed the extent of the secret operations. Oliver North, the National Security Council staffer who ran the program, became a household name. Reagan eventually acknowledged that arms had been traded for hostages, even as he insisted he hadn't intended it that way. "My heart and my best intentions tell me that is true," he said, "but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not." It was as close to an admission of wrongdoing as he would ever make. Several officials were convicted of crimes. Oliver North's conviction was later overturned on a technicality. National Security Advisor John Poindexter was convicted and also had his conviction overturned. Reagan himself was never charged, but the scandal tarnished his legacy. Meanwhile, in Beirut, the hostages remained. Terry Anderson would become the longest-held American hostage. Anderson was the chief Middle East correspondent for the Associated Press. He was kidnapped on March 16, 1985, exactly 1 year after William Buckley. For the next 6 years and 9 months, 2,454 days, Anderson was a prisoner. He was chained to walls and radiators. He was blindfolded for years at a time. He was kept in tiny cells, sometimes with other hostages, sometimes alone. He was beaten. He was subjected to mock executions. He was told his family had forgotten him. But Anderson didn't break. He exercised in his cell. He demanded books from his captors and read voraciously. He prayed. He maintained his sanity through sheer force of will. "I never gave up hope," he later said. "Even in the darkest moments, I believed I would get out." The other hostages endured similar horrors. Thomas Sutherland was held for 6.5 years. Terry Waite, a British envoy who came to negotiate, was himself taken hostage and held for nearly 5 years. Some hostages were moved frequently, kept in car trunks, hidden in underground bunkers. The psychological torture was constant. They never knew when, or if, they would be released. They lived in perpetual uncertainty. Some didn't survive. Peter Kilburn, the librarian, was murdered in 1986 in retaliation for the American bombing of Libya. Lieutenant Colonel William Higgins, a Marine serving with UN peacekeepers, was kidnapped in 1988 and executed in 1989. His captors released a video of his hanging body. The images shocked America, but still the hostages remained. The crisis finally ended between 1990 and 1992. The end of the Cold War changed the dynamics. Iran, facing economic pressure, saw value in improved relations with the West. Syria, which had influence over Lebanon, pressured Hezbollah to release the hostages. One by one they came home. Frank Reed, released April 1990. Robert Paulhill, released April 1990. Terry Anderson, released December 4, 1991. Thomas Sutherland, released November 1991. Joseph Sicipio, released December 1991. Alan Steen, released December 1991. Terry Anderson was the last. He walked out of captivity on December 4, 1991, 2,454 days after he was taken. He was 44 years old. He had missed the birth of his daughter. He had missed his father's death. He had missed almost 7 years of life. The trauma didn't end with freedom. Many hostages struggled to readjust. They suffered from PTSD, depression, and physical ailments caused by years of captivity. Terry Anderson wrote a book about his experience. He became an advocate for hostage families. But the nightmares never fully stopped. Thomas Sutherland returned to academia but carried the psychological scars forever. The families, who had spent years lobbying, praying, and hoping, were reunited with changed men. The husbands and fathers who came home were not the same people who had been taken. Hezbollah never faced justice for the kidnappings. The organization remains powerful in Lebanon today. They're part of the government. They have a military wing stronger than the Lebanese army. They're backed by Iran. The men who chained Americans to radiators, who tortured William Buckley to death, who held Terry Anderson for 7 years, they were never prosecuted. Some are probably still alive. Some may be in positions of power. That's the reality of terrorism. Accountability is rare. What are the lessons of the Beirut hostages? First, terrorism works. Hezbollah got what it wanted: American attention, prisoner releases, and eventually American withdrawal from Lebanon. The hostages were effective bargaining chips. Second, no negotiation policies are hard to maintain. Reagan swore he would never deal with terrorists. He did anyway. The pressure to save lives can override the best policies. Third, the consequences of intervention last for decades. America's involvement in Lebanon's civil war made Americans targets. The hostages paid the price. Fourth, some wounds never heal. The hostages survived, but they carried the trauma forever. Freedom doesn't erase years of chains and darkness. 10 years, at least 30 Western hostages. Multiple deaths. The Beirut hostage crisis was longer than the Iran hostage crisis. It was more brutal. More Americans were killed. And yet, most people have never heard of it. The 444 days in Tehran became a defining moment. The decade in Beirut became a footnote. Perhaps because there was no dramatic rescue, no single resolution, just a slow, painful trickle of releases over years. Perhaps because Iran-Contra overshadowed the human story. The scandal became about politics, not people. Perhaps because we don't like stories without clear endings. The Beirut hostages came home, but justice was never served. They deserve to be remembered. William Buckley, tortured to death serving his country. Terry Anderson, 2,454 days in chains. Thomas Sutherland, 6.5 years stolen. All the others who endured the unimaginable. They survived. That's the victory. But survival isn't justice, and their captors are still free. Subscribe for more stories of American sacrifice. Share this video so the Beirut hostages aren't forgotten. Comment: should Reagan have traded arms for hostages? This video is for everyone held captive in Beirut, and for their families who never stopped fighting. They waited in darkness. They deserved the light.